A cave in Algeria, 9,000 years ago. Deep in the rock, someone painted a figure, a shaman, arms open wide, body completely covered in mushrooms, not holding them, not wearing them, fused with them, like the mushrooms and the human had become one thing. Someone thought that was worth painting on a cave wall for eternity. This image is older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids, older than the wheel. Let that really sink in. It is the oldest known depiction of psychedelic mushroom use in human history. And the question nobody seems to ask is, why does this painting exist at all? Because something happened in that cave, something so completely mind-bending that the person who experienced it felt compelled to record it in the only way they knew how. So here's the bigger question. What if that experience didn't just inspire one painting? What if experiences like that across thousands of years, across every continent, actually help build civilization itself? Not as a side effect, not as a happy accident, as the engine. Let that really sink in. If you've ever been told that drugs are a modern problem, a deviation, a weakness, something humans were never supposed to touch, what you're about to hear will completely flip that story. If you appreciate this kind of content, let me know by gently tapping that like button. Let's get into it. Let's start with the oldest building on Earth, Göbekli Tepe, southeastern Turkey, about 12,000 years ago. Hunter-gatherers, no farms, no cities, no permanent homes, somehow got together, dragged 16-ton limestone pillars across open landscape, and built the world's first known monument. Sit with that for a second. These were people living hand to mouth, no surplus food, no centralized government, no system for organizing thousands of strangers around the shared project. By everything we thought we understood about how civilization develops, this shouldn't have been possible. So, what got them there? What was the glue? When archaeologists dug into the site, they found the answer, and it wasn't what anyone expected. Not altars, not weapons, not grain stores. Beer brewing vats. 160-liter stone troughs with chemical residue still locked in the rock, oxalate, the byproduct of fermenting grain into alcohol. The world's oldest monument wasn't a palace or a fortress, it was a place where people came to drink together, to feast, to build something none of them could build alone. And here's where the story breaks open. That brewing evidence predates agriculture. Humans were making beer before they were farming grain, which completely dismantles the version of history most of us were taught. The standard story goes, humans invented farming, built up food surplus, then discovered fermentation as a convenient side effect. That's backwards. The evidence now points to something far stranger, that humans may have started farming specifically because they wanted to brew more beer, that the desire to alter consciousness wasn't a product of civilization, it may have been the spark that started it. Now you might think, okay, one weird site in Turkey, interesting quirk but hardly a pattern. But here's the thing, it's everywhere. Ancient India. The Rig Veda, one of the oldest texts humans have ever produced, contains over 100 hymns dedicated to a single substance called Soma, not to a god, not to a king, to a drink. A sacred psychoactive brew that Vedic priests believed cracked open the door to immortality and divine consciousness. They didn't just use it casually, they built their entire theology around it. The very first thing humans chose to write down at scale, the first thing they thought was worth preserving forever, was a love letter to a drug. Let that sink in. Now move to ancient Greece. The Eleusinian mysteries, the single most important religious ritual in the entire Greek world, practiced continuously for nearly 2,000 years. Plato went through it, Aristotle, Cicero, the men who literally invented Western philosophy. At the peak of the ceremony, initiates drank something called kykeon, and researchers now believe that brew contained ergot, a fungus that produces a compound chemically almost identical to LSD. So the philosophical foundations of Western civilization were being shaped, at least in part, by men who once a year drank what was essentially a psychedelic potion, as a religious requirement. And then there's Egypt. Archaeologists have found blue lotus at ritual sites, Acacia nilotica, a natural source of DMT, and Peganum harmala, a plant that activates DMT when combined with it. All three, together, at Egyptian sacred sites, going back to 6,000 BC. That is the exact combination you need to produce an ayahuasca-like experience. In ancient Egypt, thousands of years before anyone gave it that name, the ancient Egyptians weren't just worshiping gods. They may have been chemically summoning them. Egypt, Greece, India, Mesopotamia, the Aztecs, the Incas, independently, separated by oceans and thousands of years, all of them arrived at the same answer. Consciousness-altering substances are sacred. They are a technology, and they matter. That is not a coincidence. That is a pattern. And a pattern that consistent across the entire ancient world is trying to tell you something. So why? Why did every major civilization everywhere arrive at the same place? This is where modern neuroscience walks in, and suddenly the ancient world makes complete sense. When psilocybin enters your brain, the first thing it does is quiet your default mode network. That's the system responsible for your sense of self, the part of your brain that constantly generates the feeling of I, the wall between you and the rest of the world. When that wall goes quiet, something remarkable happens. Brain regions that never normally talk to each other start lighting up together. Areas linked to memory and emotion start firing in sync. Sensation and meaning start cross-wiring in ways they never normally do. It's been described as the brain suddenly perceiving itself from the outside. Now picture that happening to a group of early humans sitting around the fire together, firelight on their faces. The boundary between where one person ends and another begins starting to blur. The ego dissolves. The line between you and the person next to you disappears. You don't just feel close to your tribe. You feel like you are your tribe, like you're connected to the fire, the stars, the animal bones on the ground, everything. That is exactly what ancient ritual was engineered to produce, and it's exactly the state that makes strangers, people who have no biological reason to trust each other, suddenly willing to cooperate, sacrifice, and believe in the same invisible things. Civilization is built on shared belief, and shared belief may have first been chemically unlocked. But here's what most people, even most archaeologists, don't stop to ask. How did humans find these substances in the first place? Psilocybin mushrooms grow naturally in cattle dung. Early hominins following animal herds across the African savanna would have stumbled across these mushrooms constantly, not because they were searching for them, but because they were impossible to avoid. This might not have been a discovery after all. It might have been an accident. The mushrooms got into the diet before anyone understood what they were eating. And then something shifted in how the brain processed information, in the capacity to think in symbols, to imagine futures that didn't exist yet, to tell stories. An ecological accident that may have quietly rewired an entire species. Back to that cave in Algeria, back to the shaman painted in the dark 9,000 years ago, body fused with mushrooms. That painter wasn't documenting a strange night. They were recording something that felt like the most important thing that had ever happened to them. The wall between their mind and the rest of existence came down, and what was left felt more real, more alive, more true than anything ordinary waking life had ever offered. So, they painted. And then humans built temples around experiences like it, wrote hymns to the substances that caused it, organized entire civilizations around the attempt to recreate it. Drugs didn't pull humans away from civilization. For most of human history, they were the door that let us in.